At sunset, we crossed Truckee Lake on the ice and came to the spot where we had been told we should find the immigrants. We looked all around, but no living thing except ourselves was in sight. We raised a loud hello, and then we saw a woman emerge from a hole in the snow. As we approached her, several others made their appearance in like manner, coming out of the snow. They were gaunt with famine, and I can never forget the horrible, ghastly sight they presented. The first woman spoke in a hollow voice, very much agitated, and said, "Are you men from California, or do you come from heaven?"
Those are the words of Daniel Rhodes, as told to historian Hubert Bancroft in 1873, some 27 years after the Donner Party's tragic journey. Today, as we enjoy the groomed ski slopes and snowshoe trails around Donner Summit, it's easy to forget just how inhospitable and deadly the mountains can be.
So one of the main things we're going to have to worry about is hypothermia, especially in the setting when somebody's injured and we're on scene and we have to wait for help to arrive.
Do you know how you ended up here? What happened?
Even these days, with all our high-tech clothes and gear, hypothermia can set in very quickly.
Okay, pull up hard, Bernie.
So it makes you wonder, how did these guys, with the limited protection they had from the elements, make it? To give us some idea of how the Donner Party rescuers survived out here for weeks at a time, I'm here with fellow Donner Party historian and author, Frank Mullen. Welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
So Frank, what comes to mind when you think about what the rescuers must have gone through back in the winter of 1847?
Well, they wouldn't have had the equipment, of course, that we have today, or the clothing like Gore-Tex. They would have dressed in cotton and wool and buckskin and furs. Their biggest problem would have been to stay dry, so they would have had to start a fire in all kinds of conditions. Back in 1846 in California, matches were available, but they're impractical because when matches get wet, they're useless. So they would have had to use flint and steel and would have had to go out of their way to find some dry tinder to start a fire. When they had to abandon their horses and their mules, they walked in single file with the lead man breaking trail all the way up the mountain, with each man stepping in the previous man's footsteps, all the way up thousands of feet. They made their own snowshoes en route. They took pine boughs about 2 feet long and bent them. Then they crisscrossed them with rawhide thongs and tied them to their feet. And if it got too slushy, they abandoned the snowshoes, went through the snow, and just made another pair further on. Each man had a pack of 75 to 50 pounds full of food, mostly dried beef, and they also had their own guns and knives, of course, but they also took, per man, 1 blanket, 1 hatchet, and 1 tin cup, and that was the extent of their supplies. Snow blindness affected both survivors and rescuers of the Donner Party. Tinted spectacles were certainly available for many years prior to the Donner Party, and mountain men certainly would have had some sort of solution to that because they had experienced it in the Rockies for decades prior to the Donner Party. Some of the rescuers were wilderness experts, ex-mountain men and so forth, but others were sailors and recent immigrants to California, and they did survive, but they had a very bad time of it. Many of them lost toes to frostbite, so it was a horrendous situation, and it's amazing that many of them made it out at all.
Many of the men in the rescue party started their 100-mile trek into the mountains right here at Sutter's Fort, near what would become the city of Sacramento. John Sutter offered to pay the volunteers $3 a day to risk their lives in the mountains, but one of them, John Stark, refused the money, saying, "I will go without any reward beyond that derived from the consciousness of doing a good act." John Stark became one of the most famous of the Donner Party rescuers, and for good reason. When they arrived at a location in Summit Valley that came to be known as Starved Camp, Stark's party found a group of 11 survivors huddled around a fire in a deep cavity miles from Truckee Lake. Only 2 of the group were able to walk, and a vote was taken on whether to abandon everyone except the 3 Graves children and the young Donner child, Mary. Each rescuer answered aye to the question, but when Stark's name was called, he answered, "No, gentlemen, I will not abandon these people. I am here on a mission of mercy, and I will not half do the work. You can all go if you want to, but I shall stay by these people while they and I live." Stark picked up the 2 remaining children and all the provisions, and by some miracle, he managed to motivate the sickly survivors to struggle out of the mountains, often carrying members ahead and then repeatedly going back for the others. One of the children, John Breen, later recalled, "To his great bodily strength and unexcelled courage, myself and others owe our lives." There was probably no other man in California at that time who had the intelligence, determination, and the immense physical powers of John Stark. John Stark single-handedly saved the entire Breen family and 2 children from the Graves family. James Breen later wrote, "Stark was an entire stranger to everyone in the camps, not bound to them by any tie of blood or kindred, nor having any hope of reward except the grand consciousness of doing a noble act." John Stark went on to become sheriff of Napa County and a member of the state legislature. He died in 1874 at the age of 57 from a heart attack while pitching hay from a wagon. He was, both physically and morally, a mountain of a man, and he remains a shining example of the courage of the Donner Party rescuers.